Hi, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube Live. So, I have here with me a wonderful guest, my dear friend and former physician, Dr. Brian Walker. Thank you for agreeing to do this. So, let me explain to the people, the viewers, who you are and how this transpired. So, Dr. Brian Walker was our family physician, my GP, back in Hong Kong when I used to live there during those years when I was going through the cancer, those 4 years. Now, if you're someone who knows my story, you know that when I lived in Hong Kong back then, I dealt with lymphoma for 4 years, which led to the near death experience. Dr. Brian Walker was there firsthand, who was part of my journey, following me on my journey. And he is visiting the United States, and we had him over to our home. He's in my home. And we were having this most amazing conversation, recollecting everything that happened during those days. And I said to him, would you be willing to do a YouTube Live and share this conversation with my audience? Because believe it or not, I still get a few, very few handful of people that write in and still say they don't believe what happened to me. Even though I have in the past flashed up medical records, they've said, oh, yeah, these medical records could be doctored, or blah, blah, or you've had chemotherapy, or they'll say things. So I have brought Dr. Brian Walker, who was there treating me and saw me with his physical eyes, to share some of his insights. I also want to say about Brian is that he is a lovely human being who loves helping the world and humanity. And when he was my physician back then, my family physician, GP, he was my safe doctor to go to. I hated hospitals. I hated big clinics. I did not like to see oncologists, but I loved going in to see Dr. Brian Walker. He was very assuring. And I had so much fear of cancer and the treatments for cancer, but I did not fear Dr. Walker. I feared the oncologists. So I just had to say that about him. And he now lives in Perth, Australia. He's a member of parliament there now. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to give you a second to talk, to add anything I may have missed about you. I just wanted them to know about you and how wonderful you are as a human being, first and foremost.
Well, I reject all of that. I'm just a simple doctor.
No, you're more than that. He was very open to looking at out-of-the-box ways of healing and so on. So I just wanted to recollect that time when, so for the time after, since I was diagnosed and then trying out different things, you were my GP and you were so supportive, and you would say that you will support my journey, whatever I choose. But what I remember most is that as my health deteriorated, it would get better, then it would get worse. It would get better sometimes, then, and we would get really hopeful, and then it would get worse. But what I remember is that when I was rushed to the hospital, as I was going into the coma, I actually remember being in the intensive care unit and I was in a coma, but I remember being able to see or be aware of the people around me, and I could feel their feelings. You were one of the people that I remember who came in to the intensive care unit, and I remember feeling your hopelessness.
Look, as a medical practitioner, you were in a hopeless situation. The terminal cancer, terminal organ failure, and you just don't recover from that. So I was looking at someone, I thought, you're alive just now, but not for long.
And you really felt that?
Well, I felt like a complete failure because I should have referred you on to an oncologist years before, and then I would be the normal doctor, passing the buck on to an oncologist, and then we've done all we could. But I was guiding you or helping you through this process. And it's also important, this was your journey.
Yes.
Your health is not my health. I give you the advice, but your journey, and I will accompany you on that journey as best I can.
Yes. And you were wonderful at it. And so I remember not wanting you to feel like a failure, but there you were looking at me in a coma, and and you didn't think I was going to come out of it.
No, I was certain you wouldn't.
You were certain. And I remember it was like you were saying goodbye.
Yes.
I actually remember my mum talking to you, and of course Danny, and of course my brother Anoop was there. But I remember, and I don't even know if you remember this, but for some reason, maybe because I was in a coma, it was so clear. She was looking to you and asking you for hope. And you, of course, at that moment, wasn't quite rightfully, you weren't able to give her any.
Well, that's a sad thing. I've been with many families, someone who's died or someone who's about to die, and they look towards me, what can you do, doctor? What more can you do? And it's actually a very difficult situation to be in. How do you say, listen, we've done all we can, this will take its course, we can't fix this. I felt, again, helpless and hopeless. All you can do is hold someone's hand as you're walking through that journey together. That's maybe a good thing to do. You're not alone in this.
Yes. But what happened to me actually proves that it is an individual's journey, and the doctor is not the one in control of a person's health.
Well, we like to think we are,
Yeah.
but we're not. I mean, there's so many times I've come across people who've been in a life-threatening condition, they've pulled through unexpectedly, and others who should have come through, but they've decided, no, I'm going to die, and they do. So it's not what the doctor can do. It's about what the internal decision is. I decide to live, I decide not to live.
100%, because that's what I speak about. Like, it took me crossing over, leaving my body, being in this altered state, altered reality, altered plane, altered dimension, to realize that, when I was given the choice, and there is this alternative life I could be living that's very different, that I didn't know about. That is what gave me the chance to make the decision. I do want to live. I do want to be healthy.
For a purpose.
For a purpose. I needed a purpose. My life had no purpose prior to that.
Very often I say to patients who come in seeking advice on their wellness, I'm going to die soon, or I'm not well, and I will have a long chat or a long listen. And very often I'll be saying, and so what is your purpose in being alive? You want to live longer. Why?
Yes.
Why should you be on this earthly plane? And they say, what do you mean? Well, if you haven't got a purpose in living, then what's the point?
Exactly. And you have less incentive to get well if you don't have a purpose. Now, a question that I get from people from time to time is when people who are still skeptical or debunking my experience, they will say, but maybe it was the chemotherapy that healed you. You were there. What would you say to that if someone said that?
We all grab at straws for hope. The chemotherapy, it's been started, it's going to fix things. No, chemotherapy doesn't work like that. You are in a terminal state, and it wasn't even a complete chemotherapy, it was the start of a chemotherapy. That does not cure cancer. It's physically impossible. Those who are going through chemotherapy will know you have a number of treatment courses, each one maybe 6 or 8 sessions, and then you have a pause, the body can recover, then you have the course, and the course after that. As you go through a procedure, it takes weeks, months before you finish. A single partially completed course of chemotherapy will not cure the cancer.
Thank you for saying that, because that's something that comes up from time to time. And also, of course, I had multiple organ failure.
And that's another recovery from terminal organ failure is not something that happens every day. In fact, it hardly ever happens.
Really? See, it's a good thing I didn't know that then.
Well, it would have been terrifying, but multi-organ system failure is not a minor thing. It's a body shutting down. It's the last thing before death.
Wow. And that's, yes. So this begs another big question, that if that happened to me, doesn't that mean it is possible to happen to other people? Doesn't that change the terrain of our belief system? Like, what is preventing? Shouldn't we be looking at what is it preventing this from happening to more people?
You speak as though this three-dimensional life is actually the whole purpose.
Which it isn't.
It isn't.
We both know that.
Well, we do indeed, but I'm going to die. And I said, yes, of course you're going to die. What makes you think you're alive right now? I mean, what makes you think this three-dimensional reality is actually there? I mean, Einstein himself looked at this and said, well, this is actually all an illusion, albeit, he says, a very strong perception of illusion.
Yes. Yes, it is a very strong perception of an illusion, but I'm glad you see that. Most doctors don't. Now, I want to say, most of the doctors I have ever met, wonderful, kind human beings, but they're trapped within a system that doesn't allow for them to think out of the box.
Oh dear, yes. Doctors are renowned for their need to actually be part of a cohort, a peer group. Doing anything outside of that peer group is dangerous, because if something happens and the patient doesn't do well, then I'm liable for being sued. We also tend to do what our teachers taught us. We've polished the apple, passed the school, we've gotten into university, we've done what has to be done, and we get the letters after our name, and now we've got to abide by the standards. And if we don't do that, we're measured by that. Are you part of that peer group? And if you're not, if you're outside, already you're looked at with some suspicion, great deal of suspicion. My favorite story is from Semmelweis. Did I ever tell you the story of Semmelweis? No. Ignaz Semmelweis in Austria. Now, this is 1890 something, when they had no idea about infection. And Lister had just discovered carbolic soap can kill bacteria. And the doctors thought bacteria are unimportant. In those days, you couldn't advertise then as now, because it's kind of unprofessional. So you take off your frock coat and your top hat and put on your apron. And then you'd do whatever you had to do, lancing a boil or dealing with dirty things. And you'd wipe your hands on your apron. And the dirtier your apron was, the better the doctor you were, because more people, I know. Now you go from that situation of wiping your dirty hands on your apron, and you go into the maternity ward and you examine the women who've just given birth. A vaginal examination with filthy hands, and no wonder that puerperal sepsis, that's the infection that women got after giving birth, when the raw bleeding womb was infected with bacteria from the doctor's hands.
Ooh.
Okay, and so Semmelweis said we should maybe wash our hands before we do that. And he was hounded out of medical society because he was talking heresy. Ended his life actually in a lunatic asylum, killed by the sepsis brought on by a doctor's dirty hands.
Oh, God.
Now, the point I would make is that the doctors then and the doctors now are exactly the same. It's well-intentioned, do what we've been taught to do as the standard, okay? But thinking beyond that, beyond those norms, is dangerous. So innovation is very difficult to get into doctors' minds. And here we have a situation of, this is how we treat cancer. This is the only way we treat cancer. And so you coming along here throws the whole system of medicine on its head. So therefore, we're going to close our eyes. That can't be possible. We're not going to look at it. It's all a lie.
That's exactly what I was dealing with. And thankfully, I have actually met a few really open and amazing doctors and oncologists here in California who have been giving my book, Dying to Be Me, to their patients. I have made friends with these doctors and oncologists, and I'm so grateful for that. But I think in our medical system, our system still has a long way to go. Oh, and by the way, I just want to ask the viewers and listeners, if you have questions, either for me or for Dr. Walker, please, please, please post them in the comments, and Danny will look for your questions. Danny, also known as Boo, behind the scenes here, he will look for the questions and he will shout them out.
Lovely. But you mentioned here about doctors and the system. You have to understand that doctors do not concern themselves with wellness at all.
Yes.
It's all about, you learn about diagnoses. And so if I haven't made a diagnosis, I've failed. So and once I get a diagnosis, I'll give you a medicine for that or a treatment for that. And that's what we deal with. The underlying fundamental questions don't get dealt with.
Yes.
So the idea about I want to be well would flummox the doctor. What do you mean well?
Yes, they don't know about wellness. They only study disease. And it's always a fight against disease, a fight against breast cancer month, a fight against cancer. People automatically assume that I will join any campaign or fight against cancer. I don't. I refuse to. I will join a campaign that promotes wellness, but I will not join any campaign that fights cancer, because I'm all about promoting wellness.
Well, it's a funny thing that, because we're looking here at negativity, and we're looking at the energy of negativity. If you're going to exhibit a negative energy, you're going to get negative coming into your life.
Yes.
Look, the war on drugs. It's an expensive failure. It's cost trillions of dollars, it's ruined lives, and it hasn't stopped the drug trade. The war on cancer, has it actually had any real effect? We're getting more and more cancer. Yes, the treatments are improving a little bit, but when you examine the treatments, we're not getting that much more life.
No, and it's because we're focusing on the wrong thing.
On the negativity. If we're going to focus on wellness, that's a whole different thing. Let's look at
100%.
how can we improve what's going on here rather than being frightened of what's happening elsewhere.
Yes.
Well, let's look at, say, for example, clean fruit. Did you know, for example, an apple, that nice fresh apple you get from the supermarket, may be 8 months old?
Oh, 8 months.
Maybe. And it's the nutrients often come just before the time of harvest or ripening, and then vanish fairly quickly after the harvest. So when you pluck it pre-ripe, you haven't got the nutrients. Then you artificially ripen it over months. It looks perfectly good. It doesn't have the nutrients you think it has. So how can we be healthy if we're making our food unhealthy?
Yes. And also, I liked that just a couple of seconds before this, you touched on fear, the fear of illness. So our entire healthcare system is not a healthcare system. It's a sickness scare system. And so everybody is driven by the fear of illness instead of learning how to be well. What does it mean? What does it look like? How do I enhance wellness? And what I have said before, and I say this to my audience all the time, that when you get, or if you are given a diagnosis, don't think of it as a death sentence. Even if you're a doctor listening to me, don't make your patient feel that this is now going to be the trajectory of that patient's health. It doesn't mean that their health is going to decline from here on. When you get the diagnosis, this is just telling you where you are right now, and the patient needs help in creating a wellness trajectory.
May I get a bit controversial?
Yes, of course.
Okay. One of the problems we really face is that we're frightened of life. Everything is a problem. I may go into the street and get hit by a car. I've got blood pressure in the family. I may have blood pressure and I'll die of a heart attack. It's a bit like in the front lines as a soldier, and you've got the bullets coming towards you, and I need to go and do something to go to a position, but I'm frightened that the bullets are going to hit me before I get there. Of course. So we need the courage to get up and go. And the soldiers in the First World War, they had to get up out of the trenches and charge, even though they were almost certainly going to be injured or killed. How did they manage? Well, I've researched that. They answered by saying, we are here in the front lines. We are already dead.
Oh, yes.
We are dead. And so when we get up and go forward, what's the difference? We've got a few more days or hours or minutes of life left. We're already dead.
Yeah.
So that's how they can get up and do that. Of course, a lot of people suffered. The ones who survived, a lot of suffering. But the way of doing that is actually not worrying, because I'm already dead. So if we're going to live our lives frightened of being dead, then we're not going to really live. Some people are saying, I want to live longer. I've got this fear of cancer. And I ask them, that you want to live longer, but are you living?
No.
You're not living. You are maybe alive, you may be breathing, but there's no life in you.
Wow, yes. And that is so true. And when people say to me, talk to me about the cancer and about the fear, I often say that it wasn't the cancer that almost killed me. It was the fear. It was the fear of cancer. So also, before I was even diagnosed, by the way, I used to be very afraid of cancer. I used to take all the anti-cancer supplements. I would order them online. I was on an anti-cancer diet before I was even diagnosed with cancer, because everything I ate, everything I did was driven by my fear of cancer, that I'm determined not to get cancer. And then you see what happened, because I feared it so much. I wasn't living. I wasn't living. And then I feared the cancer. I feared the treatments for cancer. I feared death. And it was that fear that killed me, not the disease.
Oh, very much so. And I get people coming to me who've got a cancer diagnosis, and they're saying, "Doctor, am I going to die?" And of course, I'm saying, yes.
Because we all are.
We all are. So what would you like to do? They come in and they come across as, "Doctor, yes, you are going to die, but what do you want to do to live?"
Yes, exactly.
And it's a very wide variety of what people are prepared to do. Some just fear. No, I'm not. Take the bloods here and into the course of oncology, and off we go, and I'll cross my fingers and hope. Others are saying, "Well, hang on, tell me more."
Yeah. Yes. And I like when people say, "Tell me more," it means they want to get into a partnership with you.
That's right. That's right. I've got a woman just now who's dying of breast cancer, and she absolutely refused to do anything to get the diagnosis and the treatment originally. So it got much worse than she'd expected. Now she's going through all the anti-cancer approaches as you've been going through, but she's still frightened of this.
Of course.
And
yes.
Deteriorating. But the real question of, okay, so how are you living? Do you really think that this three-dimensional life is where you're supposed to end up? We're all going to have an end here, and you want to prolong this, and where are you going after this? And those are questions she's not really prepared to address. I must stay here for as long as possible. There's always a reason for my daughter, for my grandchildren. I can see why you want to stay, but is that who you really are?
Yes, exactly. I want to say something really controversial, and sometimes this is how I really feel, but sometimes I hesitate to say this publicly, but I think today's a good opportunity. What if we have it all wrong about cancer? What if it isn't what we think it is? But because it's making a tremendous amount of money for the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the fear of cancer, to me, it's the fear of cancer that creates this huge business. And what if cancer is actually not something to be feared and is very curable, but the fear is actually what's killing us and making us so stressed out that our cancer cells grow faster? That's something I have believed since this happened to me.
Well, we know for a fact that we've all got cancer in our systems every day, every single one of us.
Yes.
We have an immune system which detects the cancer cells, and that's what it's there for, or one of the things it's there for. So we could then say that every case of clinical manifestation of cancer is actually an example of the immune system having failed its job.
Yes.
Should we then focus on getting a stronger immune system?
Yes.
Well, yes, we should. We could then say, well, what are we doing to damage the immune system? That's a whole different conversation about how we are destroying our lives here. And then we look at the medical association, which says we're going to make a lot of money from the pharmaceutical side there. That's more important than actually fixing the problems, because the joke is that a patient cured is a profit lost.
Yes. So what I'm saying is true.
I think so, it is. And we've lost sight of what are we actually trying to do, is to live better.
Yes.
Now, to live better in a society where we're actually being forced to live less well. Look, the psychosocial stress you're getting from an employer who's bullying you, the financial pressures we're living under, the expectations that we've got from other people we're putting on ourselves, the permission we've given to big business to actually pollute our environment willy-nilly.
Yes.
Okay, the ability we've got here to actually modify our food processing, for example, the high fructose corn syrup that we've got there, as a byproduct of overproducing grain, as a byproduct of encouraging the farmers to make more profit.
Exactly.
Okay, so why do we allow this to happen? Well, basically because we as people are not involved in these decisions. We're not actually taking it apart. We're giving it to politicians, and the politicians are being influenced by their vested interests.
Yes.
So people say conspiracy theory. Well, actually, there's a lot of fact in that.
There is.
And the question about wellness, about managing wellness, we're ignoring the basic fundamentals of how do we live well for our allotted span of life, such that we can then pass into the next existence of whatever that may be, having gained as much information from this three-dimensional reality, or the illusion of reality, so we can move on into another, whoever we're supposed to be.
Thank you for saying that. That's, yes, very well said, actually. And yeah, and I truly do believe that if we reframed this whole cancer, we would actually be handling it differently and not having as many cancer deaths. And oh, and it looks like, because I can see a gesture from Boo behind the scenes, that it looks like we have a question from an audience member, a listener, a viewer. Over to you, Boo.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Stelle from France. In fact, I will punch it up on the screen for you. Nellie says, hello, everyone, and thank you for this great live. Would you develop more on the topic of living in a world full of negativity, violence, and fear, and still explain the spirit world?
Would you like a crack at that, or would you like me to start and you can chime in?
Well, you have experienced this, so you start and I'll follow on.
Okay. So when I was on the other side, I experienced what I call a world of love, the spirit world. And I call that spirit world a world of love. When I came back to this side, I realized that that world of love, that spirit world, isn't some faraway place that we have to travel millions of miles to get to, but it's right here around us. We have it, you can access it right now. It is around us, but it is outside of the realm of our own perception. So we are only aware of our five senses and of this three-dimensional reality. However, we're able to be aware of much more, but there exists a whole other world, the spirit world, that is beyond our five senses and beyond this three dimensions, but it's right here and around us. So it's just outside the spectrum of what most people are perceiving. And a lot of you, with a little bit of practice, you can actually perceive all of that. So these two worlds are simultaneously. That's the world of spirit and this physical world. I call that world of spirit the world of love. I call this physical world the world of fear, because we seem intent to drive ourselves and the people through fear. What I understood and why I came back was to actually bring that world of love here and apply what I was experiencing there here, because this world lacked it and sorely needs it. We need to live from a place of love here to shift what is actually happening right now. And people tend to, one of the reasons that people, why there is so much fear and all of this that's happening here, is because people have lost touch with that world of love. But when you're born, you're still very much part of that love, that world of love. Babies are, they're still connected. But as soon as you start to learn from the adults and from school, you start to lose that, because you get told that you have to be realistic and that's your imagination. And I'll tell you something, when I came back from the other side and I started telling people that we live in this world, there's another world that you can access, and I would talk about it, people told me I was delusional, and they told me to get real, even though they said, yes, I know you've had this amazing spontaneous remission, which scientists and doctors can't explain yet, but you have to get back to reality, come back down to earth, stop being so delusional. I would get told that, but I refuse to buy back into this world of fear. I still choose to live with my feet firmly in the world of love while trying to navigate this fear-based world. But and my life has turned out well. I'm going to say, I don't want to overstate it, But I am super pleased with where I am in my life. I love my life. I love what I do. And it's because I stayed in that world of love. Whilst the very same people who said I was delusional are in this fear-based world where they're now crying out to me and saying, hey, we're really struggling. Our health is struggling. And look at the world. And they're living in this fear. And I refuse to go immerse myself in that world. And even when people say to me, but you're just burying your head in the sand if you're denying that all this stuff is happening. And I say to them, no, I'm not. I'm aware it's happening, but in order to help the world, I need to be in that space of love.
I'd like to add a scientific interpretation of that.
Absolutely, please, have at it.
Because you see, you've been in a place where I haven't yet been. Well, maybe I have, but I don't know, but I haven't been there. However, what I do know, everyone here also knows, you know, you walk into a place where you don't know people. Some people think, oh, I'd like to speak to that person. And other people think, oh, I'll take a distance. We are vibrational creatures, and we understand there's a certain nature coming across the ether, if you like. Which also you can express that further when we look at the scientific explanation of our existence. Look, we're most of us 0.0001% of matter. The rest of us is actually emptiness. That's the atomic structure. You break that down further to the muons, gluons, bosons, all those quarks, break them down, you're actually getting an electromagnetic wave at the very bottom of it. So we're all energetic distortions of the space-time continuum. So you could then say that this three-dimensional reality isn't really real at all. Now, if we're then noticing, and I'm sure you've also noticed, that some people are fearful of everything and everything comes at them causing fear. And other people seem to walk through as if there's no problems at all and their life goes actually fairly nicely all on its own. Because you will attract those things that you are thinking about. You will. Whether it's negative or positive, if you're focusing on that, it will be attracted towards you. Now, I'm not just saying this trite thing, you think about things positively, the good things will come. There's much more to it than that, but there's an attraction. If you're frightened of something and keep repeating that thought again and again and again, you're going to get it. Now, what we need to focus on as doctors is realizing that we have a vibrational nature, and that the three-dimensional medicine we're using is only one part of what we can do for wellness. A lot of the wellness comes from the energy inside, this ability, if you like, to actually attract wellness. Now, you might call that the placebo effect. Okay? Now, we've taken for granted there's a placebo effect. What is it? It's a bit like asking, what's gravity? How does gravity work? There's nothing there. How do we know that? The placebo effect is exactly the same. There's a vibrational nature where I can think to myself these thoughts that's going to help me, or indeed the nocebo effect, which is the negative, when bad things happen because I've thought about it. These things they exist, and they're ignored by modern life, and we should not, because this is the reality of who we really are.
I love it, yes. And I don't know why a lot of doctors don't take the placebo effect seriously. Like, how could a doctor possibly tell a patient you only have 3 months to live?
Difficult to say, but all of us are playing this game, because if you watch the news just now, you'll be bombarded with example of what to be afraid of.
Yes.
Now the news it's actually a cycle owned by a fairly big business there, and they want more of that. You take more of this because we're making a profit from this.
Yes.
Okay, so fear sells, because fear is really important. Anger and fear are two of the biggest emotions that politicians can use, and also big business. I'm angry at this, I'm going to do something. I'm frightened of this, I'm not going to do something.
Yeah.
And so we can motivate people to do these. And so we're finding these emotions are being used again and again and again to drive us into a state of being. If that that state of being makes profit for someone else, they're going to want to do it. And so if you're involved in that game, I would be suggesting stop it. Stop watching television, stop watching news, just don't buy the newspapers. Actually live for the positive. Stop paying attention to that which is driving you into a bad place.
Thank you for actually saying that, because that's what I keep saying. Stop watching the news. I don't watch the news at all. And I have a couple more questions for you, but I'm just going to ask Danny if there's anybody else, any other burning questions, comments, any feedback, anything you want to share? Okay, nothing pressing at the moment. I wanted to ask you, so I also want to tell the audience that you too were getting frustrated with the constraints within the medical system, and so you decided to join Parliament.
I became a parliamentarian because I was angry that the government was causing my patients to suffer quality of life and length of life. And so I wasn't going to have that. And in Parliament, I've discovered how much power I now have because I have a voice, because I'm a parliamentarian. The medical board, which is trying to suppress me, is no longer as able to do that. The medical board says, you're not going to speak about this, you're on your own, there's no lawyers, we've accused you of something, and now you're going to actually pay for it. And our medical defense organization, all they do is say, yes, okay, fine, just say you're sorry and we'll try and make it less painful. They don't actually do anything about that because they have all the power. But in Parliament, I can get up and I speak. In my part of the world, in Australia, the medical board there has caused the death of 17 doctors that I know of.
Wow.
17. And it's caused harm and pain to so many doctors. I've spoken to many of my colleagues and they all say, we need to do something about this, but I can't because I will have my license removed. Even the COVID vaccine there, if the patients asked for the truth and you gave anything except what the government said, if you just showed a paper suggesting that there may be a problem with the science, you had your license removed from you. The very questioning of science, which is the foundation of the scientific endeavor, is being banned now, which means that doctors are being stuck with the status quo and we're unable to move forward because the organizations round about don't want you to actually move into innovation. They don't want news, they don't want information, they want you to keep on doing more of what you have been doing because, I don't know why, it may make a profit.
Yeah, of course it is. In the end, it's to make a profit. And when going back to the time when I was in the hospital and the main oncologist who was assigned to my case, he was when I healed so quickly after coming out of the coma, like within a couple of weeks, they couldn't find any trace of cancer. And he was blown away and he couldn't believe it. And I told him about the near-death experience. And I told him that I had experienced something and he completely believed me. So he's having this conversation with me. And he said, you're not the first to share a story like that. And I remember mentioning this, what happened, I'm mentioning it to you. So he said, you're not the first to share this. And he said, I knew something must have happened because I don't even know what to write in your medical records. He was at a loss for words. And he made the gesture of throwing my medical file into the wastebasket, he was like, I don't know what to do with this. And he just made this gesture. This belongs in here. And then much later, after a few months, story got out in Hong Kong of what had happened to me. And a journalist came up to me and interviewed. She said, can I interview you? I said, of course. She said, would your oncologist, now I would have rather she interviewed you, but you were my physician. She said, would your oncologist be willing to verify what you have said? And I said, of course, because he believed me. And he knew that I couldn't have healed without some kind of outer worldly intervention. But when she interviewed him, he threw me under the bus. He actually said, oh yeah, it was my treatment that helped her. And I remember mentioning this to you and you said, I completely understand how this industry ties their hands. And so I just wanted to mention that and see if you had anything to add to that.
Truth in politics and also truth in medicine doesn't really matter. It's a perception of truth.
Yes.
And so if you're perceived to have made a miraculous cure, the doctor can't accept that. It's not possible. Therefore, okay, let's just hide that. We might even just destroy your files because no one can then prove the opposite.
Yeah.
So anything which challenges orthodoxy is going to be a problem. And this is it. The medical profession wants people to be orthodox. Orthodox means right, correct. Okay. And if we're not orthodox, we must be, by definition, not right, correct, incorrect.
Yes.
And so if it's incorrect, no, we can't have that because we're doctors and we are certainly above this this lax approach to wellness. No, no, no. We have it's all controlled and regular, and you are an outlier. You're obviously lying to us. Therefore, we can't have that.
Yes.
I wonder how many doctors are really able to tell the truth.
I really wonder. And you met one of the doctors that was also willing to tell the truth, like you, when it came to my case and my files, and that was Dr. Peter Coe. And he flew to Hong Kong from Los Angeles to study my files. You met him. We did an interview together with Dr. Peter Coe, you, myself. We were on the radio. He scrutinized my files. He said, lady, whichever way I look at it, you should be dead. And then he spoke to you and got some verification from you. And he wrote a testimonial for my book. What happened is after he wrote the testimonial, he had so many people writing to him, challenging him and trying to discredit him that he removed himself from the public eye. He's still out there doing good work for the world, but he's actually removed himself from that email address. And now people are saying there's no such person. But we still have interviews with him.
Look, this is what happened with Ignaz Semmelweis back in 1890, and it's happened to doctors time and time again. There's Barry Marshall in Australia who was almost struck off for the dangerous idea that gastric ulcers could be caused by Helicobacter pylori. Okay, and then he was offered a Nobel Prize, and in that case you're okay now. When you're outside that pale of peer review and aligning with the general thought, you're at risk. You're going to get struck off. And so Peter experienced that and then did the sensible thing from his point of view, just back off there, because if I take any more heat, I will lose my license.
Yeah. Yes. So I think if we're going to wrap up, do we have any more comments or questions or anything? Because I'm just going to wrap up now with a few final comments that I want to leave people with.
No, there's nothing urgent there, except lots and lots of people sending hearts. And let's see, love from Denmark, love from Germany, love from France. And then I'm going to have to scroll backwards here to say, love from Greece, love from Italy.
Thank you.
Yeah, no urgent, pressing questions. So it's over to you.
Okay, I just wanted to leave people with a summary. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for the love, the heart, and for listening to Dr. Brian, who is the most, to me, one of the more interesting doctors that I've met. And I just want to remind people that no doctor has the right to tell you that you are going to die. Remember that a diagnosis means this is where I am right now, but I can change my future one step at a time. And it means also changing your mindset, finding your purpose. Watch my previous video about the wellness trajectory or receiving a scary diagnosis. And so you can make changes. If I can come back from being dead, you can change your life and come back from wherever you are right now. Important note, though, is that you want to find a purpose for living. It's about living because you're passionate about your life, not just because you're scared of the disease or scared of death. So I wanted to leave you with these few things. I will continue to be back to remind you. And any last words from you?
Breathe with intent and live your life.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much for agreeing to this. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you all soon. Bye.